Thank you very much, Brian, for that very generous introduction. I must have hit the big time. I've got 2 microphones on. So I'm a scientist, and I'm afraid I can't talk to you without a few slides. But I want to start by thanking a few people. First, I should say it's an enormous honour to be given the Hellmuth Prize from the university. I'm absolutely delighted that my research can be recognised in this way. I'm also delighted to be sharing the podium with such a distinguished colleague in Dr. Beamish. I'd like to thank the Faculty of Social Sciences, but also Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry, and the university for the support that they've given me, both financially and otherwise, over the last 2 years. But I think this is really an opportunity for me to thank the most important people who are my research team. And I think a prize like the Hellmuth Prize could really have, I think it really represents the products of the people that work with me. I think it's a rather curious aspect of scientific life that the more senior you get, the less research you actually do, but the more credit you get for other people's achievements. And I'm certainly, I certainly benefited from that enormously by the people that I have around me here at Western. And this, I'm going to step back so I can see this. This picture is by no means complete. There are many, many people that I should thank who don't appear here. There are also quite a few imposters in there, in particular from Rodri Cusack's lab and Jessica Grant's lab. But I chose this picture because it reminded me that very often I feel that my main role in our research group is to be the most enthusiastic member of the research team. There I am at the back. And I just motivate people and make sure they have funding for another year of research. So I'm going to talk just for a few minutes, not about the contents of research, because that's what I do every day, but more about the process of research. And I thought a little bit about, in preparing for today, I thought a little bit about how it is that I come to be standing here today. And I think actually the answer is really serendipity. I think it's serendipity that explains a lot of the research questions that I look at. It's serendipity that brought me to Western, for sure. And I'm sure it's serendipity that has resulted in me standing here today. And in fact, all 3 of those things I think I can trace back to one particular day in 1997 when I was introduced to this person. I'm going to wander around. So I was introduced to a patient. I was working in Cambridge, and I was introduced by my then colleague, Dr. David Menon, to a patient called Kate, who Kate had arrived at the intensive care unit at the hospital in Cambridge in a vegetative state. And at that point, I had absolutely no academic interest in brain injury. I had no particular expertise in that area. I was working on how the brain remembers and recognizes faces. That was my project at the time. But it was Kate was a very curious case. She'd come into the hospital, and David Menon and I concocted this plan to put her into our PET scanner, as it was then, and scan her brain and see whether we could generate any activity. Now, this was a plan that my colleagues at the time thought was absolutely bonkers. Nobody would bother scanning a vegetative patient to see what was going on in the brain. It turns out that it wasn't such a bad plan after all, because when we showed Kate pictures of faces of her friends and her family, her brain activated in a way that was very similar to the activity that you would see in a healthy brain when a healthy person would look at faces of friends and family. And this was really extremely curious. And had her brain not activated in this way on that day, and this is one single event in my career, then I would have probably agreed with my colleagues that we were bonkers and this really wasn't a very good idea, and gone back to looking at how the brain understands and remembers faces. But this was a very curious result. A patient who appeared to be in a vegetative state was actually responding in the scanner. Her brain was responding to faces, and this led me to wonder what it meant. And actually it took about 10 years, really, of working with many people, too many people to possibly name, working closely with a group in Liège in Belgium to try and see whether we could unlock some of these people, actually work out what was going on for them. As I say, it was nearly 10 years later we worked out a method using fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging, for detecting when some of these patients were actually not vegetative at all, but were conscious but locked inside their brains. We would have them imagine tasks, like imagine playing a game of tennis, and try and detect the activity in response to them following those commands. We extended it in the next few years to look at many more patients, different types of studies, different types of experimentations, and there's always just rolling on from this one study with Kate almost 10 years earlier. In 2010, we showed that about 1 in 5 patients that goes through the most comprehensive neurological examination appears to be in a vegetative state. Nevertheless, when we put them into the scanner, we could detect that actually they were conscious. Some of them could generate these kinds of responses. And as some of you here know very well, we went on to generate a method for these patients to actually communicate with the outside world by producing patterns of activity, by imagining scenarios in order to answer yes and no questions. And we can now ask patients whether they know what year it is, and where they are, and who they are, and who is around them, and so on and so forth. And this came to a head in, I think, it came to a natural conclusion, I suppose. Late last year, we were scanning at the Robarts Research Institute a patient from London, who'd been diagnosed as in a vegetative state for 12 years. And we asked him whether he was, we managed to ask him whether he was in any physical pain. And this was a moment that, fortunately for us all, was captured by a BBC camera team who were making a documentary for their Panorama series at the time. And the point I want to make is, from that one scan in 1997, in those days it was a PET scan of really quite a random meeting of a patient who had been admitted to a hospital in Cambridge, where I happened to be. In 10 years, this field moved to a place where we're actually able now, I believe, to use this type of approach to answer therapeutically interesting questions like, are patients in pain? And these are things that we can't do in any way other than with techniques like this. Now, this is really, since moving to Canada, this has really exploded for me, and that's really, I have to thank the Canada Excellence Research Chairs Programme and the support that I've had from Western for that. One thing that we've been spending a lot of time doing is developing mobile and more cost-effective methods of doing this, doing research in patients with very serious brain injury. My team have been working on another type of technology, EEG, or electroencephalography, that allows us to get out to nursing homes, to the private homes of patients, or to hospitals all over the place, and assess the patient's residual cognitive abilities. So we're involving patients in our studies from many different places. They no longer have to necessarily come to Western. We have a CFI-funded Jeep, which we call the EE Jeep. We're very proud of that name. The EE Jeep, we drive around and visit these patients and to assess them. And that's been a major change to the way that we operate. These are just the locations of some of the patients that we've managed to reach in recent months, right across Canada, obviously focused on southern Ontario, but we've seen patients out in the west in Vancouver and as far east as Montreal. We're yet to venture up into the Northern Territories, but I'm looking for funding for an EE jet, which is then going to take us north. The EE Jeep, I don't think, can quite get us that far. So other things more locally, other areas where we're again taking the general approach of assessing brain injury with imaging in different directions. I've had a fantastic collaboration since I arrived with Brian Young at University Hospital and Victoria Hospital, and with Brian and our PhD student Loretta Norton, we've taken these same approaches into the intensive care unit to start scanning patients who are really in the first few days after a brain injury, so they are still comatose. And some of the early data that we're demonstrating suggests that this is going to work possibly just as well, maybe even better than it works in the longer term patients who are in a vegetative state. This is a patient that we saw recently whose brain responded to sounds, her brain responded to speech, even though neurologically she was entirely comatose at the time that we scanned her. She was in the intensive care unit. She went on to make a really good recovery, which is an early suggestion that this might have prognostic relevance. These imaging approaches may actually be able to tell us which patients are going to survive and which patients are not going to survive. And of course that's tremendously important information for all sorts of reasons. Other things that we're doing, I mean, this is work of my colleague Adam Hampshire, who moved with me from Cambridge. Adam has been looking at less traumatic injury, but actually equally, in many ways, equally disruptive in terms of life event. He's been looking at ex-NFL players. He's recently submitted a paper showing that retired NFL players, he can predict their impairments in frontal lobe function in tests of planning and memory based on the number of times that they were sent off the field with a concussion during their career. So again, it's similar type of approaches of combining the neuroimaging with the behavioral, with the cognitive approach to try and understand the effects or the long-term effects of serious sporting injuries or concussions. Now, of course, we didn't drive all over the US to get these NFL players with our EEG. What we did is we got many of them to log in to our website, which is another thing that we've been developing here at Western. This is a cognitive testing site that people can log into and assess various aspects of cognition, memory, attention, so on and so forth. It's now entirely hosted here at Western, although we've retained the Cambridge Brain Sciences name. It's currently running almost 40 different research studies in different countries of the world, clinical studies, pharmacological studies. It also has 200,000 members of the public that log in and test their own cognitive function. So it serves both as an active research tool, but also as a way for us to engage the public in different aspects of our research. You might be wondering what happened to Kate. The astonishing thing about everything that I've told you is it really can all be traced back to that one day in 1997 when Kate came into the intensive care unit and we decided to scan her in that experiment that we never knew had worked. And had she not activated in that way on that day, I really have absolutely no idea what I would be doing today. Now Kate, well, for that reason alone she would be extraordinary. She's extraordinary for many reasons as well as that, and one is that she went on to make a good recovery. She's still physically very disabled, but she's cognitively completely fine. So she regained her consciousness, and perhaps that early scan that we did was an indicator that was something that was likely to happen. But what I find really astonishing is that almost everything that I've worked on in the last 15 years I can trace back to that one event. And I think that is why science very often is not so much driven by ingenuity or hard work, but by serendipity, these strange things that happen to us that prove to be so important for our careers. I'll end just by telling you that I am really excited right now about the things that are happening in cognitive neuroscience here at Western. We recently moved into our regenerated? No, I don't think that's the word I'm looking for. Renovated Brain and Mind Institute in the Natural Sciences Centre. We have brand new EEG labs, brand new sleep labs, a brand new gait lab you can see there on the right hand side. As Brian has already mentioned, with the announcement last week of 3 new Western chairs in cognitive neuroscience, I think we are ready to take this somewhere else, to go in new and exciting directions. I wish I could finish this talk by telling you where I think we're going to be 15 years from now, but I'm not going to do that for fear that serendipity will take us off into an entirely different and much more interesting direction. But I will tell you that whatever we do, it is going to be very exciting. Thank you.